Okay, we're live, I think. Yep, hello. And welcome to Padmasambhava Day. Just zooming or streaming you all in now. And it's, got you, great. Hello everyone. Welcome. So yeah, it's Padmasambhava Day. We've been here, I'm Sangajit. For those of you joining us just now, welcome if you're just joining us for the first time today. Welcome back if you've been here with us already. We started Padmasambhava Day activities this morning at 10 a.m. But of course, they've been going on all week. We've had talks and classes and all sorts of events happening all day. It's been fantastic, all week, I should say. It's been really good. And yeah, we've had a very rich and interesting morning this morning. We've focused on a teaching that Padmasambhava gave. So we've been hearing that teaching in different ways and in different sort of contexts. So this morning we did it in a very meditative and contemplative context. And loads of people joined for that. It was really, really wonderful having everybody here, meditating, chanting, hearing the teaching. And we just had it again in a slightly different context where we had Sratagita leading us in an international ritual, and that was wonderful. Where we asked for the teaching from the other side of the world. It was fantastic. So here we are at the afternoon part of the day where we're going to hear some talks, and these talks again are going to be based. We're going to be looking at this teaching again. And our speakers, Dayabhadra, Padmadara and Sratagita are going to look at this teaching again and just explore it and go into some depth and on a particular aspect that struck them. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what they've got to say about this text. I will try and get us to arrive. We're having a couple of little tiny technical difficulties at the moment with Padmadara zooming in, but hopefully we can resolve them fairly soon. But what I'll get you to do is just arrive, really properly come in and try and, in a way, yes, you are just going to be listening to a talk, but we've built up a very meditative and contemplative atmosphere all day. So I hope that those of you who are joining us for the first time today can sort of catch a bit of the spirit of that from here at the LBC and this beautiful shrine that Ruth made us. And we have this wonderful figure of Padmasambhava right in the middle, rainbow streamers and some beautiful red flowers. It's very rich and exciting to be. And up here on the shrine, we've got our teaching, and it's from the life and liberation of Padmasambhava. And I'll take that teaching down shortly. And just give you the reading one more time, just as we head into these talks. So yeah, they're going to be 3 talks, roughly 20 minutes long, and we might even hear the reading again at the end, depending on how we go for time. So thanks for joining us. Welcome to the London Buddhist Centre for Padmasambhava Day, and do settle down, and I'll be with you shortly. So this is Canto 103, the advice given 3 fortunate women before the departure. Then Nanchong, the glorious noble queen, invited the Guru, that second Buddha, into the temple of turquoise dedicated to her tutelary deities, piling up on a precious throne fine silks and tables of divination, and regaling him with many pleasing things. She greeted him respectfully and made this request. Give me a few words of great import, an effective verse which I can memorize. Though I have not renounced the world, I would like to cherish within me a doctrine which at a later time would lead me to Buddhahood. To this the Guru replied, "Listen, Queen Nanchung. To begin with, pay urgent attention to impermanence, then strongly turn your mind towards taking refuge and direct your prayers to the lamas. These are the preliminaries without which no means exists. After that, disposing yourself physically to be calm. As in an empty house, the raindrops slowly gather. Relax. Do not force your mind or body. Since the tranquility of shunyata is the foundation, by forcefully turning your mind to emptiness, you chase misconceptions. In the thoughts which arise, understanding will come without doing anything. Again and yet again, work on whatever estranges you from meditation. Lay bare whatsoever arises, good and bad thoughts alike. The child who knows his way carries along the path every harmless thing he happens upon, and nothing that harms him. During the time of insight, which is surrounded by a calm and gentle aura, openness and appearance are inseparable. The six senses come forth, though appearance and voidness are inseparable. This is the real foundation, without which no means exists. During the period of meditation, there is not anything. It is simply open. But when you waver towards appearances, delusions will arise. After careful examination, understand not to discriminate, to neither accept nor reject. As anything can happen, peace will arise from within. Even when you do not meditate, for personal growth, you need to exercise effort. If you do so without accomplishing anything thereby, know that at all times realization is your own nature, and from within act for the benefit of all beings. Unceasingly do Dharma actions. When you purify yourself of your faults, realization will naturally come from within. Seal your virtuous action with prayers and a dedication for the purpose of all beings. Without such prayers and dedication, no means exists. Not falling into the errors of excitement or passivity, be filled with confidence. Here, in a few words of great import, lie preparation, enactment, and fulfillment. The doctrine's deepest riches of this life as of the life to come. Thus did he speak, and Queen Nanchung was led to salvation. I'll just pop that shrine where it's been today. And our speakers today, this text is well known to them already, and they will have had some experience of that Canto, as it's called. And so we asked them to, take an aspect of it, something that inspires them or moves them, and to see if they can draw out the meaning. And our first speaker this afternoon is Dayabhadra. I had the good fortune of being on retreat with Dayabhadra just last week. And it was very nice to meet up with him each evening and chat about the retreat. And I'm really pleased to see him again today. And he's a good friend of mine. We used to meet up in our workplace. We both worked in the same hospital. So it's lovely to have him back again so soon. And yes, here's Dayabhadra. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sanghajit, and thank you very much for inviting me to give a talk. So yeah, really warm welcome from me to you all wherever you are, and to the London Buddhist Centre. It's very nice to be in the LBC once again. So we've just heard the Padmasambhava's advice, and I think one of the things that really struck me was the first few lines where Nang Chung, the glorious noble queen, invites the guru, so that's Padmasambhava, the teacher, into the temple of turquoise dedicated to her tutelary deities. And she's piling upon a precious throne, fine silks and tables of divination, and regaling him with many pleasing things. She greeted him respectfully. And just this sense of, this is centuries ago in Tibet, and just this very wealthy, rich queen, married to the king of Tibet, and just being, she's probably had this temple built, maybe the king had it built. She's been inspired by the Dharma all her life, and she's been really wanting to meet Padmasambhava when she's heard about him. Padmasambhava, is coming from India, and he's this great teacher. He's got an incredible reputation. Not just a great teacher, but he's something of a magician. We've been hearing about today, something of a shaman. So they've tried to introduce Buddhism into Tibet, but that's not worked. So they've called on Padmasambhava, and Padmasambhava can meet the demons in Tibet. He can transform them. So she's got this incredible temple. She's got this beautiful place that she invites Padmasambhava into. And you can just use your imagination. She describes turquoise. You can imagine precious stones, wonderful silks and materials. And, it's a place of beauty and aesthetics. And and you can just imagine going into this place, and there'll be Buddha rupas. There'll be these pictures of the Buddhas on the wall as well, on cloth and in stone. And it'll already beginning to have an effect on you. It's like coming into the shrine room here at the Buddhist Centre with the rupa behind it. It already has an atmosphere, the Buddhist Centre. So if you've never been, I hope one day you'll be able to come visit us here. And it has an effect. And so it already is doing some work on our mind, our emotions, before we sit down to meditate. So many people, I've talk about the atmosphere that we have at the Buddhist Centre here. And it's the same with other retreat centres and other centres, through, maybe years of practice, and through the aesthetics of the design as well, can really help us to tune into an atmosphere that is conducive to meditation, to spiritual practice. But of course, we've got our own homes, and we might have our own shrine at home as well. I've been teaching the newcomers class for the last week, and so hello if you've joined us in the newcomers class, the beginners class over the last week. It's been great to be with you then, and sometimes I'm asked, how do you get into meditation? How do you make it a habit? And one of the ways is to create a bit of space in your own home, a corner of your room, a spare room if you're lucky enough to have a spare room, and create a space. So have a space where you can, that is conducive. It's a space of beauty. Maybe having a picture of the Buddha, a picture of a beautiful natural scene, light some incense, light some candles, have personal things that inspire you. It reminds me of some friends of mine who've got a very small flat, and they used to have this very small flat, and they didn't have a spare room, but they used an under the stairs cupboard as their shrine room. And I never actually meditated there myself because it looked a bit claustrophobic, but they really, really enjoyed it. Having that place there, and they decorated it, and I remember the outside of the door was decorated with Buddhist symbols. So we can be creative about this and creating our own aesthetics. So Padmasambhava is the honoured guest. He arrives, and the Queen is has heard much about him, and you can imagine, her doing her best to make him feel welcome. Providing food and drink. The best food and drink. She's probably wearing her best clothes. Maybe there's music and good conversation. It says she regales him with conversation. And in a very traditional way to meet the honoured guest, to put them at ease. And also, she really wants to hear what he's got to say. She really wants to hear the teaching. And it reminds me of a story from the time of the Buddha about a wealthy man called Anathapindika. He was a banker and also very, very generous, particularly with the poor. And he went to see his brother-in-law, a wealthy merchant. And normally his brother-in-law had a lot of time for him. But at this point, he didn't have a lot of time because he was very, very busy preparing. It looked like for maybe a wedding, or maybe the king was going to visit, the best food and getting the best cloths out. Anyway, eventually his brother-in-law did manage to speak to him. And Anathapindika said, well, who's this for? This looks incredible. And his brother-in-law said, the Buddha's going to visit with his monks. And Anathapindika said, did you say the Buddha? And he repeats this several times. Did you say the Buddha? He's absolutely awestruck just to hear the name of the Buddha, the enlightened one. The Buddha Buddha means one who is awake to the truth of things. And he's absolutely awestruck to hear this, and that he's here. And so he asks, can I go and see him? So the story goes, he goes and meets the Buddha the day after. So we can think about how we would meet our own heroes. If we've got a favorite author or musician, a poet, an actor, whoever it is, how would, if we had the chance to meet them, how would we prepare? We'd probably wear our best clothes and hopefully cook the finest meal and just really think about what we want to ask them. And it must have been similar for the Queen, really just to think about what she wanted to ask, because Padmasambhava, he wasn't going to necessarily be around, so she really wanted to make the most of this meeting. So we can think about how we can meet Padmasambhava in our daily lives, how we can meet the Buddha, the enlightened consciousness. And maybe on retreat is ideal conditions, as Sangajit was saying, just being on retreat, very lovely retreat, very fortunate to be, be there at this time. And, on retreat, we're trying to create this very positive, aware, receptive state of mind. So then we can be open to the teachings of the Buddha. And so they can go into us deeply and allow them to really transform us. So these conditions are really important, and we can have conditions in our daily lives the same. We might have a busy job or a busy family life, but we can really create the conditions, external but also internal, that can really support our practice. So, one set of conditions is that we can really begin to work on ourselves. And this is what we're doing when we meditate. We work directly on the mind working directly on the mind. But also we can work through our everyday actions. And this is the area of ethics. And just knowing that, actions have consequences, and the actions of body, speech and mind all have their own consequences obviously on other people, but on our own minds and hearts as well. And so the more, for instance, the more we practice generosity, it then becomes more of a habit, and the more naturally we'll become generous. And the same with kindness, stillness and simplicity, truthfulness, awareness, all of these, all of the ethical precepts we can take up. The more we practice them, the more they become a habit of mind, the more positive habits we develop. And we become our habits. We are our habits. And then, you know, we're creating a mind where we can just be more open to the truth of things. And it's not just through direct practice like ethics and meditation, but also we can have indirect practice as well, like the arts and nature, and just taking time to, you know, read poetry, or maybe write our own poetry, or paint. Or I mean, one of the things I'm doing at the moment is I'm reading a really good book about the story. It's called The Story of Art by Gombridge, and it's just a really wonderful introduction to art and architecture. It's not something in a way, I don't know a lot about paintings, and I don't know a lot about architecture, but it's just this wonderful introduction to art. And at the moment, I'm in the 17th century. I'm in Italy, and I just read, maybe a page or two a day, and I just find it very, very enriching, and it sort of it seeps into the rest of my day. It's just a very lovely thing to do. And we can just engage in music. Maybe we're singing, or we're a musician, or just enjoying music, and it has a refining effect on our consciousness. It can really begin to positively affect our states of mind. Also, nature. It's so important to have nature. Getting out of out of the town, out of the city, if that's where we are, going for a walk, going to our local park. I'm very fortunate to have a lovely park nearby, which I go very regularly, and just enjoying the different seasons. And we've definitely gone into a different season at the moment, haven't we? And also friendship as well. So friendship, such an important part of the spiritual life, where we can get support. And the warmth of friendship can begin to allow us to open up. So if we've got connections that we've built up, maybe online, maybe people we've met, just to really value them, and just to we might want to sort of give people a Zoom or a phone call, people we've met, keep those connections going, talk about the Dharma, talk about a meditation practice. And this can really help us in opening our heart and cultivating a positive states of mind. I'm very fortunate to live just not far away in a Buddhist community, and it's one of the things I really benefit from and really enjoy, just forming friendships. But whatever you might be with your family, you might be with a partner. You might be with, living on your own, but finding our ways to connect with people who are also on the path, who are also interested in meditation and Buddhism. So there's working on ourselves, but also another important aspect of practice is being open to, something other, open to the enlightened consciousness, and the possibility that there's different states of mind to our everyday consciousness. So much of my, when I notice my states of mind, so much of it is self-referential, even if it's not, sometimes it can be, unskillful, but even if it's fairly skillful, there's always a me in the background. And the teachings of the Buddha say there is more than this everyday consciousness. There is, the Buddha experienced states of deep connectedness with all life. He experienced a great confidence and fearlessness, states of bliss, a state of freedom. So just sort of knowing that's a possibility for ourselves can really bring a lot of meaning into our lives. It's certainly done for me. And we can have glimpses of that from time to time. When we practice, when we go on retreat, maybe it is through friendship, maybe it's through meditation, maybe it's through a walk in nature. We can have a glimpse of this, where this sense of self-preoccupation becomes less, and we can tune into the beauty of things. Maybe it's through just looking at a work of art. And we can do this through cultivation. We can directly do this through cultivation of positive emotions, such as devotion and also a sense of confidence in this. And even if we're not sure about it, we can just act as if, so when we do puja, so we'll be doing a puja this evening, we can just, act as if, we're taking part in this sort of play, imagine, well, what would happen if it was true, if it's true that there is this state of enlightenment, and I too could, and you too could sort of tune into this and become more and more connected to this, and somehow it can sort of, we can absorb it even more. It can sort of, come into our awareness. So we too can become more and more contented, blissful, confident and fearless, more connected to all life. And so, yeah, when we do puja, we can cultivate devotion and reverence. And just even saying those words to yourself can just begin to open your heart. It's something I've been reflecting on over the last few months, just this sense of devotion and reverence, a sense of awe and wonder as well. And the beauty of things, that there is another states of consciousness, very, very positive states of consciousness that we can tune into. And it's like having a beginner's attitude to spiritual practice, to life. So we talk about beginner's mind, and if you are a beginner, if you've come along fairly recently, well, I think that's a really good state to be in. You're open and receptive, and we've been practicing a while. It's good to try and get back into that state if we can. Sometimes we can get a bit stale, and like we feel like we've done it time and time again. But each time we meditate, each time we practice, it's a new time. It's a new state of mind. We're new each time we sit down to meditate, and so we can have this beginner's state of mind. And I came across a little snippet from Rilke. Rilke is a wonderful poet, and he's giving advice to someone who wants to write poetry. And he's talking about how to allow the muse to arise. And he talks about the muse as an angel. And he says, if the angel deigns to come, it will be because you have convinced her, not by your tears, but by your humble resolve to be always beginning, to be a beginner. So to have that sense of beginning is so important. To be a beginner, to be open, receptive, and to have that sense of being beginner. And then I'm just going to finish off with a poem, one of my favorite Buddhist poems by the Chinese monk Wu Men. And just having maybe, he's got a glimpse, or maybe more of a glimpse of the enlightened consciousness, this consciousness that, the Padmasambhava embodies. And maybe, we too can have a glimpse of it through the practice of working on ourselves, but also being open to the Buddha, open to Padmasambhava. So I'll just finish off with this poem. 10,000 flowers in spring, the moon in autumn, a cool breeze in summer, snow in winter. If your mind isn't clouded by unnecessary things, this is the best season of your life. Okay, thank you. I'll head off. Okay, good to see you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Dharma. And it was it was nice to see you up here, and just going through it very systematically and sensibly. This matter of preparing ourselves. And always sort of preparing anew, and this this point you made about having a beginner's attitude, so crucial, isn't it? It's so easy to lose that sense of how far we've actually got to go, and that really we are beginners, aren't we? We're always beginners, and we always need to start again in that sense. And yeah, I thought the way you talked about how setting up conditions and the different conditions that you talked about, just having beauty in your life and making space for that, and aesthetics, and friends, and even thinking about your ethics, and really trying to practice our ethics, our ethical actions. And then I guess you were saying, hinting at, then you start to see the fruits of those ethical actions. And it's quite timely in a way that, this evening we're going to be having these mitra ceremonies where these mitras will have started that process, and they will have had some experience and a real sense of confidence, which you talked about. And they'll be making a commitment on the basis of these things that you've just drawn out. So they're really, really good to hear. Thanks very much, Daibaja. Got us off to a great start there, our little series of talks. And it was a real pleasure to hear from you. Thank you. And so I'm hoping now that we will be able to beam into you Padmadara from somewhere in the world. Are you there, Padmadara?
I am.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you loud and clear. Great to have you. I'm going to pass you straight over to Padmadara. And I'm not going to delay anymore, just in case something happens. All right, here you go, Padmadara. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And it was such a pleasure to listen to Daibaja and to join the day. I'm sorry I can't be in the shrine room. I'd very much like to be. And I also wanted to say a very warm thank you to Shraddha Gita, who's co-leading this day, and asked us to contribute something. I can remember when we were both leading a festival day about 18 years ago, and she talked about her preceptor's guidance in giving her own name. And part of her name, she talked about the Song of Faith, and the Song of Faith, Shraddha Gita. And in asking me and others to reflect on this canto, the Canto 103, Padmasambhava's advice to the three fortunate women, a text that was new to me, but I know is very familiar, particularly to women training in the ordination process. In asking me to reflect on this, I think she's really embodying her name. This canto is such a startling, sparse, urgent and clear set of instructions. It's very distilled, very condensed teaching, truly challenging to take this in. It speaks a lot to faith, and I think it says a lot about Gita's own progress, that she's pointing us in this direction towards really pith teachings, really true to her name. Stripped down this canto. It's great hearing things drawn out from it, but it's so stripped down. It's really principial. It's almost, I found it quite difficult. The exhortation and the strength of it, I found and do find really challenging. It is so strong. It's a little bit. It made me think there were a couple of the verses in the Dhammapada around which I have a similar response. It's a little bit like trying to look at the sun. It's so strong, and sometimes it's best approached obliquely. But then Padmasambhava, my sadhana practice is Vajrasattva, so I don't have a lot of experience of reflecting on the image of Padmasambhava. But Padmasambhava, as many of you will know, is talked about in our tradition as the second Buddha. And in a certain sense, I think the whole of the Buddhist path is there in this canto. Philosophically, soteriologically, practically. And of course, it needs to be that way because the Queen has asked for a teaching which will take her, I think the phrase is, all the way to, that will lead me to Buddhahood. She hasn't just said, oh, you know, she's very clear she's not yet renouncing the world. She's living in a way that was perhaps quite resonant with many people in Triratna, in that she's in the world in many respects, but also aspires to continue on the spiritual path without following the full monastic context, although in our order we do have order members and others who do choose that form, so we have that flexibility. But many people will be looking to progress from where we are in the conditions that we have. Might be a family person bringing up children, who might be a carer, or working in the world in various ways, or coping with not being able to work in the current situation. So there's a particular couple of sentences I want to focus this 15 minutes or so on. I'll just read it again. Pay urgent attention to impermanence, and then strongly turn your mind to taking refuge and direct your prayers to the lamas. These are the preliminaries without which no means exist. After that, disposing yourself physically to be calm, as in an empty house the raindrops slowly gather. Relax, do not force your mind or body. And I want to just concentrate on the first few words and the last few words. So pay urgent attention to impermanence, and then relax, do not force your mind or body. The teaching then goes on to talk about shunyata and a whole range of other things, so I'm just going to focus on this stage of the path. So pay urgent attention to impermanence. Well, in impermanence, obviously, we can, at a superficial level, we can see this playing out in our own lives all of the time, written in the lines on our faces and the changes we see around in ourselves and in our communities. But how much do we really see this? How much do we really see the constant flow of life? And by really, I mean allowing the truths of impermanence to impact us, to impact me. Would I really, if I really took that in, would I be living exactly as I'm living now? Or what kind of changes would I be looking to make? So to really look into the constant flow of life, to pay attention to impermanence, to the dance of our feelings, emotions, health, ideas, people that come in and out of our circles. Paying close attention to impermanence, we start seeing what's principial and the structures and what goes to the heart of the matter. One of the most dramatic ways to see this is in the junctions in the wheel of life or in the circle of life. So what I'm particularly thinking about in this context most graphically is birth and death. The passing, for example, of our beloved teacher, Bhante Sangharajta, just 2 years ago. Where does that leave us in terms of our responsibilities to deepen our practice and of the Dharma? And looking, I think sometimes we're trained to pay close attention to what's happening internally, and sometimes to drop attention to what's happening externally. And of course, what we really need for our practice to be alive in the world is a relationship between both things. So just reflecting on birth and death, life and death. I was looking at the World Health Organization website, which has a count of the global COVID infection rates and the global death rates. And yesterday evening, that's the 26th of September, it was 32.5 million confirmed cases of COVID, roughly. And that included 985,823 deaths. I checked it this morning, thinking about this talk and how the world's shifted in those the day between, and 10 hours later, so early this morning, 27th of September, there were 991,224 deaths reported to the WHO. And we know, of course, that the figures are way below what the probable count is. But in places where tests have been proven, that's the data that they report. By this time tomorrow, it could be 1 million deaths. As humans, we're hardwired not really to see and fully take in our own death. It's really hard to do that, to see the finite limits on our life until our health is very severely threatened. Perhaps this is what makes it possible that we can be made aware of the realities of extinction on our planet, and yet make relatively few of the changes that might change or ameliorate this. So many of us in the UK will have seen or heard about David Attenborough's recent documentary, Extinction, the Facts. And there, the UN global panel of experts, and I know how politicized this debate can be, but I'm just staying with data which is strongly science-led and relatively free of those polarizations. And the data that was collated for the UN global panel estimates that 1 million plant and animal species face extinction now. So our food, our water, our climate are all threatened. I want to come back to what we do in the light of being alive to this degree of impermanence. But before I do, I also want to say something constructive about, well, what can we do in the face of this? And I was fortunate to live for some years in one of the men's communities, which is above this shrine room that you've seen Daya Badra just now and others in. And just above there's a community called Sukhavati community. And I was living there whilst I was living there some years, the size of the community was somewhere between 12 and 15 people. And one of the really wonderful things about living there, about the friendships, about developing our practice there, was also the really practical thing that we weren't running, between 10 and 14 households, separate households. We were living as one household. And that meant that we didn't waste nearly as much as happens in many households. So I was saying, well, what can we do in relation to waste and climate change? And one statistic that really jumped out at me is the priority to reduce food waste. We all know from buying food and preparing food and consuming food and so on that you have to eat food at the right time. Rotting food, decaying food is a graphic example of impermanence, and we know how to avoid it and what to do around it. Those of us in parts of the world where malnutrition is not something that we really live with. For the majority world, of course, malnutrition is a very significant factor, but in the relatively rich world, our problems related to that are more to do with obesity. So there's a kind of grotesque differential between the problems of the rich world and the problems of parts of the so-called developing world. But to come back to the point about rotting food, and that is a graphic example of impermanence. The data that I was looking at for extinction, the facts, it was estimated that 40% of food is wasted. 40%. So what do we do in the face of this? We can insist that thinking more closely around our Dharma practice, like what does that mean for the world? Are there ways of insisting that food is produced more sustainably, and think more carefully about how we consume and how it gets to our table? And these are really simple decisions around what we choose to buy, what we share, how we live, and so on. And one of the great things about living in a community was that we had one washing machine, not 14 washing machines. We cooked for each other. There's much less waste. So there's something about sharing there that I think is a sensible and rational response to impermanence and the damage, environmental damage connected with that. I'm also left with a very sobering reflection that at the moment, in a time of pandemic and COVID and so on, we have the data, we have the elements of the data anyway to estimate what's happening, work out our responses and so on. And at the same time, in the majority world, the global south, malnutrition and deaths from entirely preventable causes, such as child diarrhea, is a huge problem, absolutely huge problem. About 88% of diarrhea-associated deaths can be attributed to unsafe water, bad sanitation and hygiene, and there's a clear vaccine for it. We can vaccinate for the rotavirus. And yet, when we look at globally, the number of children who are dying of this entirely preventable disease, our response to that kind of impermanence is different. So I think there's something that the cries of the world is reflecting back to us about the sorts of choices that we in our societies make. So there are devastatingly clear choices on this path. I think one other thing about the COVID period is that it reduces distractions. It's been a great leveler in certain respects, and it's also revealed things to ourselves. The Dharma seeds, if you like, can be more visible in a time of a pandemic because we're moving less. Certain things are kind of reduced and simplified. So I'd like to say something about the very last few words of that quote. I'm just going to read it again. Pay urgent attention to impermanence. Strongly turn your mind to taking refuge and direct your prayers to the Lama. After that, I'm jumping a bit. After that, disposing yourself physically to be calm, as in an empty house, the raindrops slowly gather. Relax. Do not force your mind and body. Your mind or body. So I think the problematic here and the challenge is, as we develop some stillness and through reflections, for example, on impermanence, if we really attend to ourselves and the world, it is going to throw up the kinds of tensions that I've gestured towards in the questions about climate change. I'd like to look at the other, one of the other really significant tensions, if you like, related to race. Because when we are asking ourselves to reflect the turbulence of where we are, where our aspirations are, and what we're observing in the world, to hold the tension between those things requires a particular kind of approach to meditation and reflection in order to go deeper. Because what we're trying to do is develop a dharmic perspective on how to hold notions of, for example, equality, the perspective of the bodhisattvas, the mirror-like wisdom, the wisdom of equality, and what that means, taking some of these principles into our practice. And I think the invitation to relax, do not force your mind or body is really important. Yesterday evening, UK time, I was listening to the third in the series of the Courageous Conversations about race, and struck once again by the gap in perceptions between peoples from different communities, and how very early we are in the ability to attend to the different experiences of people from different communities. And I know that debate, if I can describe it as a debate, is very troubling for many from different angles. And I'm not going to try and rehearse those things here, but the point I'm trying to get to is a parallel one with the environmental point, which is to look at what's happening in the world in the period of the pandemic, particularly to zero in from the whole scale of the pandemic to what's happening in the public space since the murder of George Floyd on May the 25th of this year. So that's 4 months ago now. Some communities have reacted with completely, understandable and justifiable, I think, shock and wanting to see what our practice can do in the light of injustice of this kind. And of course, George Floyd wasn't the first, and there have been others since, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Philando Castile, many, many people. How is it possible to come to the cushion and to relax and rest into the poetic truths of impermanence when observing the strengths of these injustices? It has to be possible in order for our Dharma practice to go deeper and for us to be able to hold the tension. And by that, I mean to be able to contribute to constructive change in the world based on Dharmic principles, without being drawn into hatred, for example, or highly polarized or angry states of mind. So there's a kind of facility, a kind of muscle even to be developed, an ability to hold the tension between different positions, to reflect, to be able to go deeper, to come back with a compassionate response that won't result in extremes of those kinds. I was really moved by what I listened to yesterday in Courageous Conversations, and how extremely difficult many actually people of colour have found exploring this conversation. And at the same time, I personally felt incredibly heartened by the responses of many White Order members, and looking much more broadly beyond Triratna, some of the public agitation has been led by young people of many backgrounds, might possibly of all backgrounds, but certainly it's been a multiracial response to see how we can invent something better. I'm just got an eye on time, so I'll try and move towards rounding up. Now, the way that we do this is going to be in the way that we attend to the differences, the tensions, is going to be informed by our own life experiences. It was great to hear just now references to a really seminal piece of scholarship, Gombridge's The Story of Art. And in terms of part of the Western story of art, or an official Enlightenment perspective on the Enlightenment in the art historical sense, a version of the story of art, there's much that has been said and rightly been said in praise of it. However, the claims that Gombridge makes are culturally specific, unable to appreciate the range of art practices in Asia and Africa, and I won't rehearse the arguments there, but the point that I want to open out is that culture and our perspectives towards beauty are far richer and far more beautiful than the sometimes quite limited, understandably limited perspectives of particular scholars who are working sometimes within colonial and imperial frames of reference, unable to see the full range of human beauty. And I think when we're working, thinking, being at the centre in our practice, the invitation, for example, from trying to explore our environmental responses, trying to explore questions of cultural difference and racial difference, as our chair, Surya Gupta, has been inviting us to do so clearly and intelligently. I think the challenge for us now is to really deepen our culture in a way that can embrace a much broader range of perspectives, and that will mean being able to attend to and to listen deeply to other perspectives that may be directly challenging of our own, and then hold that in a way that still maintains harmony between us, how to hold honest differences of view. Now, I don't think that's possible unless we follow the instructions of this canto, which is strongly turn your mind towards taking refuge, directing your prayers, disposing yourself physically to be calm, as in an empty house the raindrops slowly gather. Oh, I should just say, I was looking at Bhante as Sankaracharya in seminar. He explains a little bit that the empty house and the raindrops is related to Tibetan architecture, and the key point here, whether that image makes sense or not to you, the key point teaching he was giving us is stay with the emphasis on relaxing, not forcing your mind or body. And that's interesting because it might not be expected, but I think in the face of the cries of the world, the suffering of the world, we need to attend to those perspectives without polarizing. In the examples I've given, the obvious one would not to polarize around culture, ethnicity, race, and so on, but dare to attend to the experience of the other in order to broker a dialogue, create something broader, out of which, by attending to each other, we can go deeper into our practice. And I'll just round off. I was thinking, in relation to this, I was thinking about a wonderful writer, activist, poet, really, of the American Civil Rights Movement, James Baldwin. And he, well, among his many fantastic writings, something he wrote for the New Yorker in the early 60s, I think, Letter from a Region of My Mind, which is republished in a collection called The Fire Next Time, I think. And he ends that really stunning essay, so prescient and so relevant to us now, in a certain sense, the kind of tragedy that it's so relevant to us now when he wrote it, 50 years ago or so, and yet we still have yet to move very far in this specific conversation. I'll just read you his closing thought, because it's a challenge that I try to look at in my own practice. Everything now, this is quoting Baldwin, everything now, we must assume, is in our hands. We have no right to assume otherwise. If we, and now I mean the relatively conscious whites and the relatively conscious blacks, who must, like lovers, insist on or create the consciousness of the others, if we do not falter in our duty now, we may be able, handful that we are, to end the racial nightmare and achieve our country and change the history of the world. If we do not now dare everything, the fulfillment of that prophecy, recreated from the Bible in song by a slave, is upon us. God gave Noah the rainbow sign, no more water, the fire next time. I take his last lines as an exhortation to practice in our communication across our differences. So I just finished by going back to the Canto 103. Unceasingly do Dharma actions. When you purify yourself of your faults, realization will naturally come from within. Seal your virtuous actions with prayers and a dedication for the purpose of all beings. And the phrase that is with me at the moment, realization will naturally come from within. So by following these practices, by attempting to purify ourselves through the practice of the precepts, in a certain sense, the answers will come. We will find a way to broker these dialogues. We will find a way through practice to attend more carefully to the cries of the world. And if we don't, then the alternatives are very clear and are being spelled out very clearly at this time.
Thanks very much, Padmadara. Wow, I'm so grateful to the technology to work there. Just before we started these talks, we weren't quite connected with Padmadara, but geez, I'm glad that we got that sorted and we were able to hear from you, Padmadara. Thanks so much. Obviously, you put a lot of thought and concern into the talk, and I really, I really appreciate it. There was, I mean, I love the way you started, and you talked about approaching the canto is a bit like looking at the sun, and I think you were able to sort of draw out with a very revealing talk the situation that we're in, and it is very difficult to look at sometimes, life and its suffering, and so thanks so much for that revealing nature of your talk and how challenging that can be. You know, you were really articulate and obviously really well informed, but so sensitive to the issues and so positive actually about our response as a community. And this point you made about, well, there's 2 points I thought which were exceptional, was about deepening our culture, and hopefully, you know, festivals like this in Triratna, Padmasambhava Day, just continually deepen the culture of Triratna year after year after year, and hopefully with this other point you made about developing the compassionate muscle. I hope I'm paraphrasing you correctly there, but I thought it was a really interesting image that while on one hand we want to relax and not force our body or mind, as the Canto exhorts us to do, so we do want to not force, but we do want to develop the compassionate muscle. So yeah, that was very interesting, very helpful, very thought-provoking. Thank you again, Padmadara. And yeah, our final speaker of this afternoon is Sradagita, who is just coming in here on my right. Sradagita has been leading Padmasambhava Day with me today, and we've had a very rich and interesting day. I can't believe it's 5:30 already. It's amazing. So here's Sradagita, and the third talk in relation to Canto 103, Advice to Three Fortunate Women. Thank you, Sradagita.
Okay, thank you, Sangajit, and thank you very much to Dayabhadra and Padmadara. Yeah, 2 very rich talks. Dayabhadra really setting the scene, talking about the importance of preparation, which we do have to return to again and again to make our practice really effective. Padmadara just bringing such a contemporary slant on the Canto and bringing it right up into our contemporary world, which we really need to do with practice. So yeah, thank you very much to both of you for being willing to share your reflections. So yes, I am going to also be talking about this canto, and I first wanted to just say a few things about the text. So it's one of my favorite texts, and I was saying this morning that to me it feels a bit like a Tibetan version of the Heart Sutra. It's pithy, it's direct, it's profound. And it comes from the life and liberation of Padmasambhava, which is stories about Padmasambhava. And I was also saying, and I've been saying this all day, and in case you haven't been here, I'm just going to repeat it, that Bhante Sangharakshita said that we can approach the Dharma or try and listen to the Dharma as if it's literature, and read literature as if it's Dharma. And I really like that, because stories have the power to move us. They have the power to move us and propel us to act. And that's just so crucial, so that our practice isn't just what we do on our meditation cushions. So I remember as well the first time I heard this particular canto, and I remember that my spine tingled and shivers just went up and down my spine. And I still have that sometimes with this text. If I'm receptive, it has that sort of power in it to really sort of activate my whole kind of being, really, to really listen to the text. I also think it's very much like a mandala, that you can join in the text at all different points, and different points will strike you at different times. And it draws you in like a mandala, which again is very beautiful because it's got this circular feeling about it. And that also reminds me of the four quartets by T.S. Eliot, because the four quartets also have this kind of circular element to them. It's like you circle round, you circle back. In the beginning is the end, in the end is the beginning. And I think it's very similar with this particular text. It really has that same kind of quality to it. A really good friend of mine, Vimla Chitta, once described this text as when you really sort of hear it and listen to it, is that it's a bit like a big swooshing pool of water, and there's supportive steps on either side of this pool, but it's a big pool of water. And you enter into this pool from different supportive steps, and then you get swooshed around, really swooshed around, so your hair gets all sort of messed up. And then on the other side, there's some more steps for you to climb out again. And then you come into it again at some other point. And again, I really, really like that particular image because it also suggests this sense of depth. And the text does lead us, it's got layers, and it leads us deeper and deeper into the Dharma. So yes, I'm also going to be looking at the same bit of text as Padmadara. Actually, we didn't check beforehand what each of us was going to look at. We just thought we'd let whatever happens happens. So yeah, I'm also going to be looking at those particular lines, but of course I'll be saying different things. But yeah, this text starts very much with this meeting between Queen Nangchung and Padmasambhava. And to borrow an image from the Christian tradition, I sometimes imagine this as a bit like an annunciation, where Queen Nangchung is making herself really open and receptive to a teaching, to, you could say, the grace, the blessings, the sort of teaching of Padmasambhava. So I see it as very much a meeting. And the thing that most strikes me about Queen Nangchung is that she really, really does want this teaching. And as Dayabhadra says, she sets the scene so well, she prepares really well. But there's one little thing about Queen Nangchung that I've always noticed, which is that she says that she wants a teaching which at a later time would lead her to Buddhahood. That sense of a later time. So it's like there's this slight kind of, I'll do it a bit later, which is something that we can all do. You know, I'll meditate later, I'll do X later, I'll do that later. But the time is now. And we can see this scene that's been set. You know, she's piled up her tables of divination. There's silks, there's beauty. There's everything set and prepared, and she's asking for a teacher, a teaching which at a later time would lead her to Buddhahood. And how does Padmasambhava respond? Well, Padmasambhava says, "Listen, Queen Nangchung, to begin with, pay urgent attention to impermanence." And when he comes in like that, it's almost as if you can hear the rattling of those tables of divination. You can feel those silks being sort of swept or blown around just by this whoosh of energy, this listen, Queen Nangchung, stop, listen, really listen to this teaching. It's a bit like, I was thinking of monks who make these really beautiful sound mandalas as well. You know, they're painstakingly beautiful, really amazing. I remember going to look at one being created by the River Thames some years ago, and it was so intricate, delicate, made of sand. And then at some point, at the end, it all just gets swept away. So there's this sense of this beauty, this ephemeral beauty, and it's all just swept away. So Padmasambhava is really saying to Queen Nangchung, the time is now, pay urgent attention to that. So the Buddha said, of all the footprints, those of the elephant are the broadest and deepest. And of all the meditations, that on impermanence is the strongest and most beneficial. I'll just say that again. Of all the footprints, those of the elephant are the broadest and deepest. Of all the meditations, that on impermanence is the strongest and most beneficial. So pay urgent attention to impermanence. In a way, Padmasambhava is inviting the Queen to really look at impermanence. And looking at impermanence is one of the ways, or one of the methods, if you like, that we can use to look at how things really are. And impermanence is quite broad. I could talk to my sister about impermanence and she would know what I'm talking about. I can talk to my neighbor about that, but I might not be able to talk to them about shunyata or emptiness, but I can definitely talk to them about impermanence. So it's quite broad, but also as a reflection, it has the capacity to then take us down into also reflecting on dukkha or unsatisfactoriness, and also emptiness and shunyata. So from that breadth that impermanence offers us, and the fact that everyone can relate to it, it does take us down into deeper waters. So it is very broad, but also very deep. And impermanence also points us to the precariousness of everything. The precariousness of life, the precariousness of our security, the precariousness of our happiness, the precariousness of our prosperity. All of those things we may have really been coming up against over the last however many months, where we've been living in a pandemic, where we are really confronted with, well, so many things, not being able to do all the things we might be used to doing. We might have lost our job. We might have lost someone close to us. We might have had an illness ourselves. All of those things are very, very strong for us all to sort of meet in a way and confront. So when we do actually reflect on impermanence, it also leads us, if we really do reflect on it, to both this precariousness of life, but also the preciousness of our life. The preciousness of our life. And as Buddhists, the human life is seen as precious because it gives us the opportunity to practice. And it's easy to lose. In the words of Tsongkhapa, all things are brief like lightning in the sky. This life you must know as the tiny splash of a raindrop, a thing of beauty that disappears even as it comes into being. Therefore set your goal, make use of every day and night to achieve it. So you've got this sense of this ephemeral life, and also this sense of set your goal, make use of every day and night, really make the most of your life. And making the most of your life in terms of the Dharma is to practice, but also to practice for the benefit of all, which is what we're trying to do. So we're not just practicing for ourselves. And as the text moves on, Padmasambhava talks about unceasingly doing Dharma actions. And again, he talks about dedicating that to the benefit of all beings. So after this teaching of paying urgent attention to impermanence, he then goes on to talk about opening ourselves to the influence of others, the spiritual influence, opening ourselves to the blessings, opening ourselves to friendship. Influence can come from, the Buddha, Padmasambhava, or it might come from one of our friends who are a bit closer to us, who can actually reflect us back clearly and kindly. So we need to be open to all of those influences. And the other thing I wanted to say is when we really do reflect on impermanence, as well as leading us to the preciousness and precariousness of life, it also can have the effect of making everything very, very vivid and vibrant and just really alive at the same time. One of my favourite interviews that I ever watched was from Dennis Potter. And Dennis Potter was being interviewed when he was dying of cancer. And he talked about being able to see the plum blossom tree outside his window. His life had been sort of squeezed by having cancer. He couldn't do very much. He was swigging morphine from a little flask. As he talked to Melvyn Bragg and as he was being interviewed. But what came across was this sense of him being in the nowness of life. He talked about the blossom as the blossomest blossom he had ever seen. And he could see it. And he felt the wondrousness of that, the nowness of that. And I think when we really glimpse impermanence and we let it touch us, it can have that effect. And it's really good to really take note of those times when that happens in our own experience, so that we both hold the precariousness of life and the preciousness of it. So after this urgency, Padmasambhava then talks about relaxing. And it's like we're seeing Padmasambhava in two different modes. So we've seen him more in his Vajra mode. So he holds a Vajra. And he says, pay urgent attention to impermanence. But Padmasambhava is also the lotus born. His name means Padmasambhava, means the lotus born. So this teaching about relaxing, do not force your mind or body, to me that suggests this lotus quality, this more organic quality that we need in practice as well. So he's talking about relaxing, opening, disposing ourselves physically to be calm, as in an empty house, the raindrops slowly gather. And I think that's a profoundly beautiful image, the raindrops slowly gathering in an empty house. And for me, that brings to mind an image from a Tarkovsky film, where this character who lives in a house that's sort of broken down and has an open roof because it's falling apart, he has all these pots underneath the leaks in the roof, and he places these pots. And there's this beautiful moment in the film when it rains and you just see these water pots collecting the water, the raindrops. And the film just focuses on the drops of rain falling and the sound of that, the profoundly beautiful simplicity of that. And so sometimes when I'm listening to this text, listening to this bit being read, that's what I think about. I think about making myself open, receptive, as empty as I can of all my sort of thoughts and ideas about things, and then being open to this nourishment, this rain. So it's raindrops that are falling, which to me are, well, they're the water of life, aren't they? They're giving a plant nourishment. So when we open ourselves, it's raindrops that fall in this canto. So very, very beautiful. And then this relaxing and not forcing our mind. So it's like we're sitting back. So we're trying to sit back. What are we trying to sit back from? Well, we're trying to sit back from all the things we get entangled in normally, like our ideas, our stories, our own versions of selfing. And selfing's a verb, isn't it, that we sort of do really. So we're trying to notice all those entanglements and things that get in the way of us actually sitting back, relaxing, being. So yeah, that's a really beautiful image. And I've got a little thing I want to read to you about the kind of effort that I think sort of captures how we want to or need to work in meditation. And it comes from actually a book by the poet David Whyte. And he's talking in this book about work, and he's talking about creativity. And at some point in this book, he uses a story of this sheepdog. And the sheepdog is called Cymro. And Cymro lives in North Wales. He's an old sheepdog. He lopes around. He's only got one good eye. And you can imagine this sheepdog with the green hills of Wales behind him. And you can imagine that the sheep are like the thoughts and the ideas and the stories that we tell ourselves, the entanglements and the selfing that we do. And this is how this sheepdog with one good eye, a loping, slightly limping gait, how he uses his energy. And if I am ever feeling like I'm pushing a bit in meditation, I often bring this sheepdog to mind. His economy of energy is just completely brilliant. So, Cymro never ran. He never needed to. The young sheepdogs took off in curving runs up the sides of the mountains to move the sheep along. But he would simply limp behind the multitude of ragged backs and lean slightly towards them, showing the flock his good eye. With pinpoint accuracy, the sheep would pass straight through the gap in the wall. Cymro was a virtuoso. He knew the pivotal place to stand, the pivotal ways to move. He occupied the center of the sheep universe and knew their collective minds before they did. He barely ever broke into a lope. So I think when we relax and we really sit in that kind of, that pivotal place, then we can actually bring all the different parts of ourselves together so that we can reflect more and more deeply on the Dharma, more and more deeply on this teaching. And it's another way of making ourselves even more receptive for the next bit of the teaching, which we're not going to be talking about in these talks today, but we'll be hearing the teaching again. And as I said earlier, this text sort of circles around. So we've just been focused on the first section, but we can keep returning to that. And probably the reason we focused on that is because we keep needing to return to our vision, to what moves us to practice, and, you know, preparing again and again. And the cumulative effects of that really supports us going deeper in our practice. So I'm just seeing if there's one more little bit from, yeah, that's it from Kimro, the sheepdog. I wasn't sure if he had one more thing to say, but he doesn't. But yeah, let the relaxation and the opening to the teaching, let that sort of open you to these raindrops, these little nourishing, water, life-giving nuggets. Drop by drop.
Thank you very much, Sradhagita. Yeah, the one shame about this online situation, you want to give a big round of applause, don't you? I mean, that's how I feel after each talk, and particularly at the end of the three. I want to give a huge round of applause like we would if we were all here. How many of us are here, Fred? 56 of us. You know, we could give a fantastic round of applause, couldn't we? So do that with your emojis or whatever it is that you can do it with online. Do show your appreciation in the chat box so that so the speakers can see that later. But yeah, Sradhagita, that your passion for this canto is really fueled the whole day, and it's really infectious. It certainly infected me, and yeah, I mean, just having passion, and I think it's the truth of it that really stirs your faith, the truth of the canto, and then your passion for that truth is, I've just found it, you know, very infectious, and Padmadara mentioned that as well. So it's interesting that passion and interest and conviction can be just as infectious as other things during this pandemic. Yeah, the three talks were, what I thought from them, it was sort of like looking at this canto and seeing how it's important, with Dayabhadra talking about how we can actually make use of the conditions. So how we can see that the canto is important, what we can practically do. Padmadara seemed to then draw out why it was important, to try and do something about the suffering that we experience ourselves and in the world. And then I thought with you, Sradhagita, it was like, well, when is it important? And you really drew out the now. It's really important now to read these teachings and reflect on them deeply. And I mean, it's just so important to have people with some depth of experience to relate their experience to ours. And you brought out some wonderful images there. This now that we need to act, it's not a sort of telling you off for procrastinating now, it's for the benefit of all beings now. And for making life more vibrant, which you drew out really beautifully. So, and then of course you just balanced that with this urgency, with this aspect of just natural unfoldment. So it's beautifully balanced and very interesting and very thought-provoking. And I just want to thank the three speakers one more time, from all of us and from me. We're just about to wrap up the talk section. We're back in 1 hour for the Mitra ceremonies and Padmasambhava Day Puja. It's going to be a massive event with Mitras.
10 new Mitras.
10. Unbelievable. Here in the LBC and with you watching online. So I'm really looking forward to seeing you then. do tune back in at 7 o'clock, and we'll make Padmasambhava and this festival really come alive. Thanks very much for joining us. See you soon.